Before anyone comes at me and says the Sam Raimi films are a masterpiece, maybe haven't watched the films in a while. I, in fact, did watch all 3 films recently and was surprisingly disappointed that the first one wasn't as good as I thought it was. The other 2 were the same, if not better than I remember. Yep, even Spider-Man 3. I had a better time watching Spider-Man 3 than the first Spider-Man. Believe it or not, I once thought all these films were the equivalent to the Godfather trilogy, but now my recent viewings have changed everything. I even rewatched the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films. The first one was a lot better than I remembered, but still, it's only okay. And the second one was one of the worst films I've ever seen. But we're not here for Andrew Garfield, we're here for Tobey Maguire. I might be going on here, so I'll stop ranting about useless stuff and tell you why the first Spider-Man film isn't really that good.
Look at little Goblin Jr. Gonna cry?
I always thought the dialogue was so bad that it's good, but I was only half right. Some line deliveries are awful, but hilarious, like,
I missed the part where that's my problem.
and
Back to formula.
but others are just slow and boring, like the entire conversation Peter and Mary Jane have in their backyards.
Act on stage.
Really? Well, that's perfect. You're awesome in all the school plays.
Really?
Yeah.
Why are they talking so slow? Come on, I've got places to be, taxes to pay. There is no reason they should be talking this slow. Also, Aunt May doesn't really say anything good. I'm confident this isn't the actress's fault. It's just, try and say something inspirational, say how much you miss Uncle Ben. Try and say something inspirational, say how much you miss Uncle Ben. Scream and hyperventilate. Try and say something inspirational, say how much you miss Uncle Ben, and so on. They really screwed her over.
This is something else.
If you say this is nitpicking, shut up. Even people in 2002 thought the visual effects weren't that good. Most of the time, you can't even see the effects in action, because a good majority of them are used when it's dark. So, as I said, hard to see. But when they're used during the daytime, specifically when the Green Goblin and Spider-Man have their first fight, it's horrendous. They move too fast, the skeletons look a bit too stiff, and I kinda want to say that the effects team could have done a bit better, but for all I know, this may have been the best they could have done at the time due to budget and deadlines.
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
The editing choices in this film are just weird. There's a slow motion part where it builds up to Flash attempting to punch Peter, and the punch doesn't even fit at all with Flash. It looks so off the sooner you notice. There's also this jump scare that shows up out of nowhere. Why is this here? Am I missing something to this? One last thing I want to point out is how quick some cuts are. Pretty sure they cut like 5 shots into 2 seconds.
It's Spider-Man!
At least give it some time. Cut it down or cut takes which track the action.
You'll get your rent when you fix this damn door!
This really bugged me, and I know exactly why the lighting isn't good. As I said before, the main reason why it's so dark during the action scenes is to hide the visual effects. So when it's dark, you can barely see anything, and when it's bright, the colours don't match. During the fight scene at the parade, the sky is clearly blue, but in some parts of the fight scene, and when Peter saves Mary Jane, the sky looks almost golden-like. I'm not a weatherman, but the colour of the sky doesn't change within a few minutes.
Pack your things. Get out of my building.
This is the only segment where I will give this film credit, but still talk about its negatives equally. I'll start off with the positives. J.K. Simmons is perfect as J. Jonah Jameson, everyone knows that, and Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin is an absolute joy. Those are the only 2 that really stand out to me, others not so much. I know other people have said this, but the high school students do not look like high school students. Also, one thing that people never talk about in any Spider-Man cast is the age of Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Peter's parents should be mid-40s to mid-50s, so why are they in their early 70s? Props to Spider-Man Homecoming for having an Aunt May that's age is reasonable, but in the Sam Raimi films and the Amazing Spider-Man films, Peter's guardians are just too old. Even after all that I've said, I'm still really excited about Spider-Man No Way Home. And if you've watched my MCU ranking video, remember how I said no one cared about Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man? Possibly me and Tobey Maguire could be in the next Spider-Man film. And Andrew Garfield, but no one cared about his Spider-Man. Well, I take that back. If you haven't watched this film in a while, and you want to before No Way Home comes out, I wouldn't. If you remember the Sam Raimi films as the funniest superhero films you've seen, keep it that way. It may lower your expectations. Do you know Michael Jackson once wanted to play Spider-Man?